So in this quick video, I'm going to show you how to enhance your RAW files in Adobe Lightroom. This is the latest Lightroom version. I actually have up to date on that. And, you know, RAW files come out a little bit flat off the camera. And, if you shoot JPEG, you'll see the images are sharper. They have more color and punch. And I just wanted to show you how you can do that. It's really easy in Lightroom. There's a million different ways to process photos, so just keep that in mind. I'm just showing you a couple of tricks here on how I like to do it. But at the end of the day, shooting RAW gives you more versatility than a JPEG because you can edit them further and things like that. So here's what it looks like, just a RAW processed file here, and here's the unprocessed file. So let me just zoom in so we can compare these quick so you can see the difference, because you might not notice the difference right off the bat. But looking at them side by side, you can see this one on the right has more color. It's a little bit sharper. That's harder to tell. But I also brightened the eyes a little bit. And I cleaned up a couple of spots. Look, I'll zoom in here and I'll show you. See how the eyes are a little brighter on the image on the right? And I think I cleaned up a couple of spots. No, I actually didn't. But this spot on the nose here, I probably should clean up. And again, the hair is still there. I didn't bother editing out all the hair. All that can be done in Photoshop. That's much more advanced editing. I'm just showing you the basics here. How to, give the image a little punch and things like that, okay? I have a bunch of sample photos on the bottom here. You could see that I'm going to go through. So let's just start with this first image here of Layla. And I'll show you how to do it, guys. All right, so step one. Let me just go Shift tab again to bring everything back. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into develop mode here. And step one for me is enabling the lens profile correction. So I'm going to do that first. The next step for me would be to go to the crop tool. Now in this case, I'm actually not really going to crop the image, but I could crop it, maybe just turn the head a little bit so it's not so drastic. Something more along those lines. And you can see the rule of thirds grid comes up by default. You can actually change that grid. So something like that, like I said, I really don't tend to do that depending on the image, but in this case, I'm just showing you the process, like the orderly process that I normally take. So I would normally go to crop next. The next thing I would do, I would adjust the exposure a little bit. It seems like it needs to be a little bit brighter. Something right about there looks good to me. Now, the next thing I like to do is I usually like to use this vibrance slider. It works better than saturation in a lot of ways. You can raise the vibrance up quite a bit, and it doesn't really ruin the image per se. Saturation tends to drown out the colors a little too much, in my opinion, but vibrancy works, I don't know, just better. So I tend to drag that up a little bit, as you can see. And now, I really just wanted to brighten the eyes a little bit. So before I brighten the eyes, I apologize. I do want to just add the sharpening. So you can go here on the detail tab, and sharpening right around 53 seems to do the trick. Just tacks it up that little bit. Now, like I said, back to the eyes. Notice this adjustment brush here on the top right. If you click this brush tool, this little dialog window here drops down. And now you can apply any different setting you want to the actual brush. And then when you paint with the brush, you have the brush size here, feather, and flow right below. Okay, and you actually have an auto mask feature as well, which is a little bit more advanced. I'm not going to go into that right now. But in my case, I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger. And you can see the brush size is increased. It's a little bit too big. Just drag it down a little bit. Something like that. And then over here on the exposure, notice how I have the exposure raised up. This is from my previous use. So previously I raised it up. All you have to do is double click on the effect word here, double click that, and it'll reset all of these features, okay? But what I want is I want to raise the exposure, so it was actually set how I wanted it. And then I can just simply paint over the eyes, like so. All right? So I'm just going to paint over these eyes that little bit, and you could paint multiple times to increase the brightness, because again, the flow is at about 40%. So it's not going to, the adjustment's not going to all paint out in one brush stroke. It's going to take like 2 or 3 when it's at 40% to get the maximum effect. Now, this little dot here represents the mask. See that? The red, how it comes up? That's the mask that was created for this particular adjustment brush. So because this brush is currently selected, I could now raise the exposure. See that? and you can adjust the brush. So now that I have this adjustment, I can actually just sharpen the eyes more, add more clarity, things like that. Very powerful, very powerful. So again, that's just a basic quick edit. And one other thing I might do on a photo like this, I would go down to the effects tab here and I would add a little vignette. All right, so I'm going to drag that down, something like that. And then I like to bring the midpoint out a little bit. And then I like to feather it quite a bit to make it more smooth, okay? Quickly on Layla here, how to fix some of these imperfections. The spot tool here is the trick for that. So you can take this and then set it to healer clone, and then you can set the feathering. Notice how that's adjusting there. And I'll make the size a little bit smaller. And then I can just get rid of the spot on her nose. And then you can drag the area where it's going to be, where you want to clone from, or heal from in my case. So the opacity I'm going to drag up, and you can see there it's pretty much gone. There's another spot. I wouldn't normally get rid of all these, but I'm just showing you how to do it. It's very simple. So when we're going back here, I can show you in the history. Notice on the left here you have this history tab when you're in the develop mode. I'll just close the collections mode here for a second. And here's the import. And here's the quick edit. So again, it's nothing drastic, but literally this took me like a couple of minutes to do. And if I wasn't talking and teaching as I was doing it, I could have done this in like under a minute probably. So Lightroom's very powerful in that way. So this is the purpose of this video, is to show you what you can do very quickly in Adobe Lightroom with your Sony RAW files, or any RAW file for that matter, but obviously I'm shooting Sony. So here's an after. This is the edited file, and here's the unedited. So you can see there's a little extra space there. It looks a little flat. The image is a little bit cool. Needs to be warmed up a bit, and I cropped it just a bunch. I actually darkened the background quite a bit. So I did a little bit more to this photo. So let me show you how to do that. All right, so again, on this image, the first thing I'm going to do is enable the profile correction. You can see it's pretty drastic there. I'll close this window out. So depending on the image, guys, sometimes I do things in, different orders. So right now I want to recover those highlights a little bit. See that? Just so I'm going to pull that back. Then I'm going to raise a little bit of the shadow detail. And I'm really just concerned with Jace at this point and this hotspot right here. So his eyes and shadow areas I'm looking at, and this hotspot. So that's what I'm looking at when I'm making these adjustments. Next thing I want to do is raise the vibrance a little bit. And you can see that just brought the image to life a little. And sharpness, drag that up a little bit. Right around 50 seems pretty good. So let's see here. Next, I'm going to adjust the crop. Let me go to the crop. Here we go. Yeah, this definitely needs an adjustment. So I'm looking at the table. It's like, how crooked do I want the table? I really don't want it to be too crooked, but I want his eyes to be slightly off center. So something like that. And I'll drag this right around here. For some reason, that seems to be balancing in my eye. So I'll do that. Let me actually back that off. That hotspot down there is killing me. I'm actually going to drag this down a little more, bring this up a little more. Yeah, that looks better to me. Something like that looks better. All right, so again, I'm just going off eye here. So now this hotspot here, it needs to be toned down drastically. So I'm going to click the adjustment brush here, and that brings up this menu, and I'm just going to drag it down. Look at that. Drag that sucker all the way down. Now I'm going to make my brush bigger. Shortcut key for that is the right bracket. So I'm just hitting the right bracket over and over, making a huge brush. Look at this. Tone that down. Let me drag up the flow here. Put that at 100% for now. So now I'm getting 100% of the adjustment in one shot for the most part. Let's drag over here and darken that area up a little bit. Now I'm just going to make the brush smaller. All right. Now I can do a highlight recovery and drag it down a little more. Something like that. Now the last thing I'm going to do to fix this is I'm going to grab the clone tool. I'll leave it in heal mode actually, and I'm going to make that bigger. Let me drag that up. And I'm going to click right on this really bright spot. And I'll just drag it over here to this darker area. Like that. And then I can dial in the opacity of that a little bit, just to make it blend a little better. All right, now close that. So that's a lot less distracting anyway. Now I'm just going to drag the little vignette there. Something like that. Feather, midpoint. And now if you look up here at the histogram, you can see the overall exposure is low. So looking at Jace, it's not bright enough. So I'm going to drag this up a little bit. So something like that, guys, looks pretty good to me. And let me just show you the before and after. Kind of spent a lot of time on that, but so there's a before and there's an after. All right, guys, so this next photo is my buddy Jim here, and you can see the edited version I did quite a bit, it looks like. So let me show you how I did that. All right, so step 1, I'm going to go to the lens profile. Click on that. Step 2, I'm going to go to the crop. R is the shortcut key for that, guys. So I just hit the R key. Let's drag that down just a little bit. Something like that seems to look good to me. All right, now it looks like I need to raise up the brightness, but I don't want to raise the brightness up over here. That's already bright. So in fact, I'm going to bring the highlights down a little bit to recover that area. Like that. Then I'm going to bring the shadows up a little bit. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to raise the clarity just a touch, and then I'm going to raise the vibrance up. Excellent. Now I'm going to go to the detail, raise that to about 60 on this particular image. Masking, I'm going to drag up a little bit. I only wanted to sharpen Jim. Tone curve, a lot of times I just enable this, but on this image, I think I'm going to not enable it. Actually, I'll enable it. Tone curve there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to brighten the face up. So I'm going to use my adjustment brush, and I'm going to go to shadows, raise that up, and then exposure, I'm going to raise that up. And notice how that was down low because it was at the previously used setting. So the flow I'm going to lower a little bit this time because I'm going to be painting his face and I don't want to overdo it. So let me just click here. There we go. Let's brighten up his face a little bit. And now I can back that off because it's an adjustment brush. I can individually back that off like so. So let me lower that down a little bit. And then I could raise the flow up a little bit. Now I'm going to zoom in and I'm just going to brighten his eyes with the same adjustment brush. There we go. Brighten up this one a little bit. There we go, something like that. Now I'll close that. And again, I'm showing you how to do this quickly, guys. So now the vignette, I'll bring that down just a touch. Raise the midpoint away a little bit, especially because his face is in the corner, and then I'll feather it a little bit. And that'll do it for this quick edit, guys. This next photo I showed you in the A9 review, how you could just pull the detail back and the information in the highlight areas, it was like a dynamic range illustration type shot, but I just wanted to show you how I did that. So check this out. First thing I'm going to do, enable lens correction. All right. Now I'm going to scroll up. Now this side over here is really, kind of blown out. So I'm going to drag the highlights back like so. Then I'm going to grab this tool. See this tool here? It's the gradient filter. And when you click this, it behaves just like the adjustment brush. You can dial in whatever settings you want. So let me reset everything. Double click the effect. I'm just going to lower the exposure. And now, because it's a gradient tool, how this works is you just click and then drag. So I'm going to click and drag like so to get the areas I want. Right about there is how I did it. And then I could raise the saturation up while I'm over here. Just a little bit anyways. Clarity. Apply that as I'm over here. Again, there's no need to necessarily do that. I was just showing you. And then you can dial it in, make it look a little more realistic, something like that. Close that. All right, so then I'm going to grab the adjustment brush, double click the effect to reset it, raise the exposure, and then I just want to make my brush really big, so I'm just holding down the right bracket key now, and I'm just going to paint that a little bit to brighten it. And then I'm going to back it off here just to dial it in more precisely. Okay. Then I'm going to close this. Now I'm going to raise the clarity overall on the image. This type of image can benefit from some clarity. And then I'm going to raise the vibrance overall on the image. There we go. So that's a quick way to edit a photo like this. Let me just show you the original. So there's the original. And there's the edited. So this image I'm just going to edit on the fly. I didn't really play with this one at all other than the lens correction. So I enabled that. So let me zoom in here. Let's examine the detail a little bit. See, it looks pretty darn good to me. I'll just add this remove chromatic aberration anyway. And notice there's a little bit of sun flare there. So I'm going to crop this sucker. You might want that sun flare effect, but in my case, I'm going to crop this in a little bit. Right about there. I guess I'll leave that little bit of sun flare right in the corner. I'm going to raise the sharpening up, vibrance, clarity, highlights I already dragged down a little. You could see how much that recovered. And that looks pretty good. Another thing I would do is when you're cropping it is if you go to, on the corner here, you can adjust the angle just to verify that your horizons and stuff are straight. It's a good little trick to do. You just use the grid quick and you're like, all right, let me look at the verticals. All right, perfect. You know what I'm saying? Just a little trick there. Let me just enable the lens profile. Do that first. Detail, I'll raise the sharpening up. Somewhere around there looks pretty good based on this detail of the tree. Now vibrance, I'm going to raise that up. Something like that. Looks pretty good. And I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest with you. Just a nice landscape scene here. But another trick you can do, you can grab the gradient filter here. Gradient filter tool, drag that down, and then you can, darken the sky a little bit. Something like that looks pretty good. So let me just show you a before and after here. Yeah, there's an after, there's a before. Let me go to this image here. Show you there's a before and there's an after. Alright, so this is just like an industrial shot at that Pelton water wheel from the review. So you could see my eye is immediately telling me this is crooked. So the first thing I want to do is fix it. And now I'm looking at it and the background looks straight now, but the screw still looks a little crooked. So I have to compromise, So I'll just put it right around here. And that's where I'm going to end up. So in this image, I definitely want to raise the sharpening up. Actually click this little tool here and then click on the bolt. And then I'll jack the sharpening up because that's what I want to be sharp, is that front. And then the masking, I can drag that up a little bit so the background doesn't get over sharpened. I'll enable the profile correction. Now tone curve, I'm going to enable that by selecting the medium contrast down here. Notice on the point curve, you can select medium, strong. I'm going to go with strong actually. Now clarity, you can drag the clarity up a little bit to give you that a little bit more definition. I'm going to back it off. Vibrance, a little bit of that. Now fine tune your colors here. You can drag, if you're seeing just a little too much purple, see that purple there? You can drag it just a little bit towards the green, and that looks a little bit more accurate, somewhere around there to my eye. Something like that. I don't know. I just look at it and then adjust it, and then I fine tune it, and whatever it seems to settle on in my eye is where I end up. So right around there looks good for this image. Now, another thing I would do is I would raise the vignette on this one just to pull the eye that little bit. Raise the midpoint a touch, feather. So that looks pretty good to me. There's a before, there's an after. Now this image I'm going to edit, but this time I'm going to show you a little bit more advanced editing, okay? So I'm going to use the Nik filters to do the work. Check this out. Anyways, here's the Google Nik collection. Highly recommend getting this. It's free. You can download it. There's no strings attached. You just download it and you get this incredible editing software suite. And the ones I use in particular are Color Effects Pro here. I love this one in particular. Silver Effects Pro I use sometimes for black and whites. HDR Effects Pro I use often and haven't used it in a while though, honestly. And Sharpener Pro I really enjoy using. Define is great for noise. I haven't used that one in a while, but it in the past has worked great. Analog Effects Pro is not really my thing, but there's a lot of awesome, presets built in there that give you amazing effects. So anyways, let me go back to what I was doing here. So like I said, I'm going to edit this in with the Nik filters. So first thing I'm going to do is just dial in my exposure, and I just want to make sure that my lens profile correction is enabled, and it is here. And let me just remove any chromatic aberration that might be there. I'm just going to check that anyway. And I want to leave my tone curve flat. Okay, so I have lots of room here for editing if you notice the histogram. I have room in the blacks, that's where I want it to, when I want to go in to do the Nik software stuff. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here and I'm going to go to Edit In. So notice how when you install the Nik software, all the stuff comes up. So I'm going to do Edit In, Sharpener Pro 3, Raw Pre-Sharpener, because this is a raw image. So I'm going to sharpen it. And I'm going to edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. It's going to turn it into a TIFF file. And now I'm in the raw pre-sharpener. So you can just look at a couple of spots here and look at them in the background. If you notice on that little loop view on the bottom right, you can see what it's doing. It's adding that sharpness. It's doing a very good job. So you can then change the amount of sharpness you want, drag the adaptive sharpness up a little bit on this image, sharpen edges, drag that up just a touch, and that'll be good. And then you can use these control points, more advanced stuff. I'm not going to go into that right now. I'm actually going to back that off just a little bit. Looks like a little too much. All right, now I'm just going to click Save, and that's going to create a TIFF file and then re-import it back into Lightroom. So now I'm looking at the TIFF file, and it's been pre-sharpened. So now I'm going to go to Edit In, and I'm going to go to Color Effects Pro 4. And I'll just do Edit Original this time. I don't need to make another copy. I'll just keep editing the same TIFF file. And it's processing. And this is pretty much what I like to use. These are my favorites here. And if you go to all, you'll have tons and tons of options. But these right here are the favorites that I tend to use most. So as you can see, it picked what I used last, which is tonal contrast. And that's my favorite one pretty much. And you could do a lot of work in here. You can enhance all sorts of stuff. Highlights, midtones, shadows. This is where I tend to have it though in general. Saturation is a little bit high on this particular image, but I like the way it looks. You can change the type of contrast you have. You can also dial it in if you're just trying to affect one area. Notice how I have the highlights at 11% because I don't want them to blow out, so I tend to drag the highlight area up a little bit. So this way when it renders, it doesn't blow the highlights out. I want it to look natural, but yet just have that nice punch, but I don't like blown out areas. So I always like back that highlight area off a little bit. Now, another thing I can do just to go a little bit further with this image, this is normally where I would stop, but to go further, I would add another filter. So let me add a filter here. Now this time I'm going to select Glamour Glow. I'll show you what that can do. It'll add a nice dreamy effect to the image. See there. And highlights, I have backed off quite a bit. Put it right about there. Shadows, something like that. Let me back the glow off. don't want it to be too glowy. But anyway, I'm just showing you how you can add multiple filters. And there's with just the tonal contrast. Here's a little glamour glow. All right, I'm going to click save. And there you have it. Now in here, I would dial it in a little bit more. Raise the vibrancy up. Just a touch, that's a little too much. Right around there. And then if you look at the histogram here, you can see I could drag the blacks down just a little bit, or I'll just add a curve. Add a medium curve. There we go. It's looking pretty good. Let's raise the brightness up a touch. Make sure the highlights aren't blown. Alright, here's another landscape image. That's a TIFF file. And here's the original RAW file. Alright, so this image here, the sky's pretty bright here, so I underexposed a bit just to make sure that I didn't lose any of the detail there. F11 shot. So I enabled the lens profile. Let me just show you that. And let me crop. Let's fine tune that edge there just to make sure the horizon looks good to my eye. It's like a deceiving area. Sometimes the horizon looks straight, but it's not straight. It's really weird. Alright, so anyway, let me go into the Nik filters. I'm going to do edit in, sharpener for the raw file. And this time it's a raw file, so I am going to edit with the Lightroom adjustments. And I'm just going to drag down the adaptive and drag it towards the edges a little bit. Let's take a quick look. Alright, looks good to me. Save. And now I'm going to edit in Color Effects Pro. This time I'm going to edit the original. I'm just going to work the same TIFF file. So tonal contrast is here, and it looks like it did a really good job. It still looks a little bit underexposed, but I'll brighten it a touch in Lightroom. So let me add a filter here. And let me just show you a couple others. Detail Extractor, it works pretty cool. You can see that brightened up the image quite a bit. So I might actually leave this one. I'll just dial it down a touch. There we go. That looks good. Let me add another filter. I'm going to go to Brilliance and Warmth this time. Let me raise up the saturation. And that looks pretty good. Nice color. Add a little more warmth. Yeah, I'm liking the way that looks now. I'm going to add one more filter and go to Pro Contrast. And I don't think there's a color cast here, but let me drag this up and see what it does. Looks pretty good to me. Correct the contrast. Dynamic contrast. It just adds a little to the shadow areas. I'll add a little bit. Alright, so let me save this out. Wow, that's a big difference right there. Here's the original RAW pretty much. And here's the edited file. Alright, so the last image I'm going to do for this video is this lens flare shot. I actually took this with my old school 50mm f1.4 lens. Had a lot of fun with that lens the other day. There's an article about that on my website if you want to check it out. So let me go to the medium here. Something like that. Medium contrast tone curve. Then I'm going to drag the highlights back. Get a little bit more sun detail there. Yeah, something right around there I think looks good. Add a little bit of more of a vignette. Feather it quite a bit. There we go. Alright, now I want to raise the vibrancy. Something around there looks pretty good to me. And then I'm going to grab the adjustment brush. One other thing I wanted to do was just brush this area. Okay, that looks pretty good. It's a shame these clouds here are a little bit blown out, but it's really not much I can do about it. And drag the highlights back, drag them up a little bit. It looks a little better right here actually, where they're just all blown. So let me drag that up. There we go. That actually looks a little better to me. Alright guys, so that's about it for this video. I hope you got something out of it. Like I said, editing can be quick if you want it to be. You just have to bang through it, practice, and you get your workflow down and you get some really good results. very quickly, as you can see here. Have a great day, and please be sure to subscribe and check out Sony Alpha Lab when you get some time. Some good articles on there.